In today's video, we're back with some updated NHL trade rumors. We're talking about teams like the Washington Capitals, the Buffalo Sabres, the Colorado Avalanche, the Minnesota Wild, and the New Jersey Devils. Plus, there was a fair bit of activity today on the NHL waiver wire. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So in case you missed my previous video just posted earlier this evening, there was a trade that went down between the Boston Bruins and the Minnesota Wild, with the Bruins acquiring Charlie Coyle from Minnesota in exchange for younger forward Ryan Donato and a 5th round draft choice. So let's get started here with the Minnesota Wild and these trade rumors, because there's lots of other names that are kind of being mentioned as the Wild could continue kind of cleaning house here and preparing more for the future, more so than this year. I mean, we've already reported before that they had consent from ownership to do what was necessary in order to make this team more competitive for the future, even if it meant missing the playoffs this year. Of course, owners are in this as a business. They do want to make the playoffs. That does generate a lot of extra revenue. But at the same time, this team has been, a team that's made the playoffs consistently, but really hasn't made a playoff run. They've been going out in the early rounds and have kind of been, middle of mediocrity here for quite some time. So Craig Leopold's given Paul Fenton and his staff permission to do what's necessary here. So we've even heard names like Jason Zucker being mentioned in the trade mill. Of course, he just signed a big extension last offseason, a 5-year deal of $5.5 million after coming off a career-high 33-goal season. So, of course, he's only in the first year of that. So he's got 4 more years at $5.5 million. His name has certainly been out there. We've heard Eric Stahl's name out there. Now he's a pending UFA. Of course, he signed, a very team-friendly contract just a couple of years ago with the Wild. Put up some phenomenal numbers last year. His numbers have come down a little bit this year, but he's still having a pretty solid season with all his experience. I'm sure he'd be a very valuable asset to a team going on a playoff run here, some of the top contenders especially. I mean, we've heard his name kind of linked to teams, like Nashville, like Winnipeg, like teams like that are even in their own division, which we don't normally see a lot of interdivision trading, but there's certainly teams that would make a lot of sense for Eric Stahl. Now, he does have a form of a modified no-trade clause as well, so certainly his consent could complicate things on where they want to send him, but his name is certainly coming up a lot. There's a lot of teams interested in a very, valuable, experienced forward like him. And of course, the other name that had been mentioned quite a bit was Charlie Coyle, but of course, he has a new landing spot here going to the Boston Bruins. So the Minnesota Wild are expected to continue making some additional changes here. It's also been expected they might consider trading a defenseman in order for some more additional scoring out front as well, but that very well might be something that kind of waits for the offseason, depending on the market here. Minnesota's certainly not going to be really in the market to acquire any kind of rental players. That wouldn't make sense for them right now. They kind of want to shed some salary, get themselves better positioned here for a long-term, boost to their team and boost to their scoring. They need to get younger, they need to get faster, and they need some more depth scoring for sure. So keep your eye on the Minnesota Wild. The Charlie Coyle trade very well could just be the beginning of a large exodus of players heading out of the state of hockey here as we approach the NHL trade deadline coming up next Monday, February the 25th. Now let's jump over to the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Washington Capitals. Now, they made some interesting moves today. First of all, with the waiver wire, it was being reported earlier today that they were putting forward Dmitry Yaskin on waivers. That turned out to be false information. They actually had a last-minute change of heart and put Devontae Smith-Pelly on waivers instead. Now, it's been believed, based on information from head coach Todd Reirden as well as other members of the Capital staff, that there's a lot going on. It's kind of what he had to say here when he was talking to media afterwards. There was a lot of things going on internally, and it's believed the Capitals are lining up a trade that likely will go down tomorrow afternoon after they know for sure whether Smith-Pelly either clears waivers or if he is claimed. So if he clears waivers, he can be assigned to the minors, bearing part of the salary, opening up a roster spot. And of course, if he's claimed, he goes off the roster and his full contract is moved out. So either way, it creates space necessary for them to bring in another player. It's been speculated the Capitals have been having a lot of talks and kind of scouting a lot with the Los Angeles Kings. They might be looking to bring in like a veteran depth forward, for example, like a Kyle Clifford or maybe a Trevor Lewis. Those might be some guys they're looking at here. It's hard to say exactly what's going to go down, but with the Smith-Pelly news being on waivers, that is apparently being done to designate a roster spot for another team. Now, I would likely think that DSP likely does get claimed on waivers, is my guess. I mean, he was a beast in the playoffs last year, put up 7 goals, earned himself a new contract. but obviously the Capitals were still a little leery in committing to him long term. Smith Pelly's bounced around a fair bit, but really last year's playoffs was kind of his version of a coming out party, if you will, where he really broke through and had some of the best hockey that he's had in his NHL career. Became a Stanley Cup champion and certainly was a fairly big part of that team. So kind of an interesting move here. Obviously, if they felt like they could get that same kind of performance out of him in the playoffs again this year, it seems a little questionable why they want to move him out to bring somebody else in. But I would fully suspect a lot of the other contending teams are going to be taking a long, serious, hard look here at the waiver wire and potentially putting in a claim for Devontae Smith-Pelly after seeing what he did in the playoffs last year. And stay tuned for what the Capitals could be doing for tomorrow. Like I said, there likely will be a trade. It could very well be with the LA Kings. It could be with another team as well. They're not the only team they've been talking to, but that's the big kind of speculation right now. Of course, the other player that the Capitals have been rumored to possibly be moving is Andre Burakovsky, and there continues to be links there between Burakovsky and the Montreal Canadiens and the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Habs are a team that probably wouldn't mind adding, but like Mark Bergevin has gone on record to say, he's not in the rental market. If he's going to make a trade, he wants to acquire a player that can be a part of the club for more than just the rest of the season. So Burakovsky would be a player who could kind of fit that bill. He's still a controllable asset. And he could also fit well with the Canucks as well. They got a lot of great young players there that he could play with too. And Burakovsky, like I said, over time he was kind of falling out of favor with Washington. So we very much see the Stanley Cup champion Capitals make a few additional moves to kind of position themselves for the best potential run here to defend their championship. So stay tuned. It would not be shocking to see a trade announced involving the Capitals tomorrow afternoon once we know if Devontae Smith-Pelly has been claimed on waivers or not. Now, staying with the waiver wire here momentarily, you may be aware Michael Hagelin was placed on waivers yesterday, and he actually was claimed. He was claimed by the San Jose Sharks. Now, prior to being a member of the Florida Panthers, Hagelin did spend parts of 2 or 3 seasons with the San Jose Sharks prior to that. So he's certainly a team he's familiar with, who's familiar with him. We've already seen a quote from Joe Thornton indicating he's quite happy to have Hagelin coming back. He said he's a player that works hard and always sticks up for his teammates, so they're quite happy to have him. Obviously, like I said, he's going to probably be a depth forward. Likely won't dress as a regular for sure, but in certain key matchups, depending on who they face in the playoffs, could very well prove to be a valuable asset. And where they picked him up on waivers, without giving up an asset themselves, kind of makes sense. So obviously the Sharks are adding a little grit, a little muscle to their lineup here for a playoff run, but Hagel's kind of one of those last players is kind of still designated basically, in that enforcer type of role that we don't really see anymore. Like I said, I don't really think Hagelin does a lot of things well, but he can fight. He is tough. I'll give him that. But outside of that, not a whole lot of use. He'd probably sit on a bench and play, 4 to 5 minutes with a handful of shifts, which is not something you really see that much in today's NHL. But, he might serve a purpose to the Sharks. Now, the Philadelphia Flyers, with the number of goaltenders they have now active on the roster with Brian Elliott coming back, they have placed Mike McKenna on waivers, which comes as no surprise. So we'll see if Mike McKenna's journey through the NHL and all the teams he's played for this year will continue, and see if somebody might pick him up as a depth piece as well. And also from yesterday, Patrick Eaves of the Anaheim Ducks did clear waivers. Like I said, I'm not surprised at all. He's barely played in the past 2 seasons, so he went unclaimed, has been assigned to their minor league affiliate. So we'll see. It wouldn't be shocking if Anaheim tries to find a taker for him at the deadline, but it's unlikely that happens, really, considering he still has another year on his contract and he's barely played. More than likely, he rides it out in the minors for this season. Hopefully can come back stronger next year and see if he can contribute in the final year of his contract with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, staying with the Ducks for a second, there was some rumblings earlier tonight as well that they were in the process of trading backup goaltender Ryan Miller over to the San Jose Sharks, which seemed quite surprising, really. Why would the Sharks want a number 3 goaltender like the caliber of Ryan Miller? They've already got Martin Jones and Aaron Dell, and I realized throughout the whole big picture of the season here that Jones and Dell haven't been quite themselves and haven't put up the stellar numbers that they've kind of been expected to, but they've been pretty decent, throughout the stretch here, and really to get a guy like Miller, it seems a little bit odd, but you never know. I mean, Ryan Miller does have a form of a no-trade clause. I could see him, maybe making that lateral move to San Jose, staying in the state of California, maybe making that work for the remainder of the year. He is a pending UFA. If he does play next year, it was said that he very well would possibly even go back and re-sign for one more season in Anaheim. Hard to say exactly, but that so far has proven to be untrue, but it's to believe that the fact that they were talking has been basically confirmed. I mean, some of the insiders like Elliot Friedman had mentioned that trade's not happening for now. Doesn't mean that it won't either later this evening or tomorrow or another time here, but keep your eye on that as well. The Sharks appear like they might want to add some extra goaltending depth heading into the playoffs. Now, another player getting a lot of attention here is Marcus Johansson of the New Jersey Devils. Like I said, a couple seasons back, they basically stole him from the Washington Capitals as they were kind of strapped for cash with the salary cap, and the Capitals gave him up to the Devils for not a whole lot else. I mean, last year he was injured for a big chunk of the season, but he's a guy with a fair bit of experience and certainly a guy that's getting a lot of attention from a number of teams. Some of the teams believed to have interest in Marcus Johansson include the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Vancouver Canucks, the San Jose Sharks that we just mentioned here, and as well as his old team, the Washington Capitals. So obviously the Capitals are quite familiar with this player and very well could make that acquisition, but depending on what other moves they make here, if that other speculated trade with LA goes down and what we see happen tomorrow, we'll kind of answer a lot of the questions on what the Capitals either want to and will be able to do here at the deadline. But Marcus Johansson is a pending UFA. Certainly could be a key contributor to a lot of teams adding some depth scoring, and the Devils are getting a lot of interest, so it is quite likely that he does get moved, just a matter of where he goes. And apparently the Buffalo Sabres have inquired on Carl Hagelin of the LA Kings, which is a kind of surprising move. That came from Elliot Friedman. Not really sure why the Sabres would want to add Carl Hagelin. Now, he is on an expiring contract. The guy can skate still, but hasn't been overly productive in Pittsburgh or Los Angeles this season. The Sabres are certainly by no means guaranteed to be a playoff team. Kind of a surprising one, but according to the information we have there, the Sabres have inquired on Carl Hagelin. And I also want to touch on the Avalanche here quickly here as well before we go. There's certainly some of the players getting some interest. Now, I had some comments from Avs fans asking about Tyson Barrie, and I did some digging, and right now there's just not a whole lot of chatter around Tyson Barrie as a defenseman now. But keep in mind, being a right-shot defenseman who can produce some offense, be good on the power play, with the Avalanche kind of falling out of the playoff picture, would not be surprising to see some chatter on his name pick up, and he very well could be a player that we see get some interesting offers to the Avalanche. But right now, I don't have any reason to believe he's going to be traded, but that very well could change. A lot of these things happen quickly when we're getting this close to the deadline. But a few players that are believed to be on the move here before the Avalanche, it's believed they'd like to move forward Sven Andrighetto, and even defenseman Patrick Nemeth could very well prove to be a good depth defenseman on a lot of teams going to the playoffs. So those are a couple guys from the Avalanche right now that they would certainly be interested in moving, and there has been some mild interest, at least at this point. So we'll see if things pick up, and they very well could be guys that we see on the go here as well. So that is your latest roundup of all the latest NHL trade rumors. Certainly leave your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section on some of these players and where you think they might go and what kind of impact we might have. But it looks as though we might have at least one, possibly a couple more trades to discuss around the NHL tomorrow. So stay tuned. We'll be back with all the information as it comes up. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you do, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.